Welcome to the Golden Feather. Grab a pint, a plate, and take your seats. Your hosts, Vertek and Chibi, are back from their latest adventure.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Golden Feather. Today is the 10th of February 2023. We are on episode 155. Here with our friend WiccaSloth, just slothing around. And how are you today, friend Wicca?
Hi, I am fantastic. I'm super excited to finally be here with you and Chibi to do a podcast with you guys. I've been a long time viewer. Vertek and I have had many conversations. I've already been doing my thing for a long time today, and I'm excited to be here.
A long time viewer, first time podcaster.
Oh yeah.
And as always, the lovely and talented Chibi next to me.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. Had a long day. Very productive day, but long nonetheless. Very excited to get into some of these topics that we're having tonight. But how about yourself?
Oh, my day's been pretty alright. Kind of like you said, a little bit busy, a little bit productive, a little bit lengthy for my taste. It could have been over hours ago and I would not have complained in the least.
Absolutely. As a quick reminder, I think our Twitch alerts are not going off, so if you would like to know when we're live, go and sign up on our Discord for a TGF alerts role, or ask us about it. Notice that that's been a running theme for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, kind of stinks, but you know, Twitch is as Twitch does.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
So, just in case somebody out there in the world does not know who you and what is it that you do?
For those who may not know who I am, my name is WiccaSloth. I'm the fastest sloth in the world, and I play MMORPGs. But today I'm on a podcast.
Today I'm you're a Slothcast.
You can find me over at twitch.tv/WiccaSloth, Instagram.com/WiccaSloth. I have a Twitter as well, but I mostly do Instagram. Twitter's kind of been backburnered. I don't really use Twitter all that much. But I play everything from small indie MMOs. If it's an MMO, I've played it. I've tried it out, given it its thorough test, or I've played it for years. I do a lot of modded Minecraft. I also do some solo RPGs. I've done all the Final Fantasy playthroughs on stream. I've done a couple JRPGs. Oh, what else?
If it says RPG, it's been done.
Pretty much.
I heard you've also played Valheim?
Yes, I also do. We get down on a little Valheim from now and again. We have a modded server that we play Valheim on. We're running 3 different Minecraft servers right now.
Jeez, nice. Chat was trying to convince us to play Valheim the other day.
It's a good time. Valheim's a lot of fun.
Actually, someone that pops in quite often, Sovereign, says that the shield and blocking system, and that is their favorite.
I would concur. It's really nice because you can pretty much block as long as you want, but mobs have the ability to knock you back. Essentially, they can make you disorient and knock your shield to the side, and it just depends on how good your shield is and how strong the mob is.
We're actually going to be touching on some of that because today's topics include combat, some game mechanics, and then, of course, as always, some random topics.
We never do random topics.
Never.
Never. We are on track all the time.
Absolutely. But I guess I want to kind of start off with the game mechanics because the combat will kind of lead us into a little bit of the official Ashes discussion for this month.
Okay.
But we were talking about some different types of mechanics and things like that. But one thing that is being shown off with the latest iterations is the class synergies. And somebody on the forums, my bro Viero, I think is how you say this person's name, he posted up a conversation talking about the combination synergies, archetype compatibilities, and ashes, and ultimately presenting the idea of why does the tank have to play just a tank role? Why can't it be like kind of this thing that evolves depending on who you're playing with, and thus bringing in these synergies. A couple examples they gave were the Keeper, which is a summoner tank, fighting alongside a spell hunter, which is a mage hunter. And essentially the Keeper causes the arrow that the spell hunter shoots to become something of a barricade or somehow affect that arrow as it passes by the Keeper. And then another example was a cleric tank with a mage mage, where should a lightning bolt from a mage hit the cleric, then the cleric can then launch their healing skill in the form of like healing rays or something like that. What are your thoughts?
It's interesting. It's really interesting to think about. Like, so far from what I've seen, I really like the synergy ideas of if I use an ability that prompts a stagger, and then someone else follows it up with an ability that prompts it to change over to a stunned condition. Mm-hmm. I really like that. That's like a new way of going into combat that we haven't ever seen before. Right. And it's really interesting to think about all the different ways that could be applied. Right. We could, there's almost infinite potential in what they could do with that. Mm-hmm. I agree. From like, you know, say for example, like the tank Aegis ability that we saw in the tank showcase. Taking that Aegis ability and having it up and running, and someone else coming behind you with a different ability of some kind to morph that shield into a different shape. Mm-hmm. It's really cool. I love the idea of having this flexibility and being able to pair your abilities with different archetypes and different classes. Yeah, I feel like it adds a lot more versatility to it instead of being the same like tank job or the mage that only does the high DPS, which is that person's worry. Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting to think about. It's like it offers a new style of play that we haven't really gotten to experience before, and with there being 64 different classes, like I said, limitless. There's so much potential that they have, and we've only seen 2 examples of how this works. Absolutely, yeah. But it's really neat, the concept in general. I love it. It's not just, oh, here's my kit, this is what it does, and I only rely on my own abilities. It promotes team play and it promotes teamwork, and I think it'll kind of help mitigate a meta as much. I could be wrong, but it will allow for like raid groups, for example, like to have a lot more versatility in what classes you want to pick to bring to a raid team, because you'll also now have to think about synergies. Yeah, exactly. Vertec, what are your thoughts?
I think I have very complicated thoughts on this topic here.
That's fair.
Kind of keying off of how they were presented, mainly. Okay. And my big thoughts on it are that I really like the synergies that they brought together so far. Like Wicca was saying, we have time, Vertec. So, I really like the idea of synergies. I like the fact that you can have one effect put out by one class, and another class can come along and do something that triggers an extra reaction on top of it, instead of their typical reaction from that skill. I think that can make play very dynamic. It can open up possibilities like, what if, instead of the stagger turning into a stun because of those two, what if the stagger turns into an actual knockdown to prone, which makes them liable to take more damage? Instead of being stunned, they're kind of slowed for a second, so they take more damage, or an armor break or something like that. But I think getting too in depth with going to individual classes instead of primary archetypes actually is what I meant to say earlier. Like primary archetypes having a skill that they will interact with another primary archetype. I think I like that.
Yeah.
But going down to individual skills from individual of the 64 classes and how they're going to interact with the other 63 might be a little bit too intense. Unless there is quite literally just one skill from one class that's going to interact with one skill from a different class, and call it a day there.
Right, and that's kind of where the difficulty of such a large game like this comes in, with the 64 classes.
True. I agree.
Yeah.
And we don't want them to fall into the same rut that Arcade fell into, where they had, what was like 200 something classes, but only 12 of them were viable.
Yeah.
Wow. I never played Arcade, so I wasn't exposed to that. What, they're legitimately like 200 different classes, like League of Legends style?
So essentially how it worked is you picked a starting, we'll call it an archetype for ease of terms. You picked an archetype to start with, and as you leveled up, you picked 2 more. So you combined 3 different ones to make what your class was. And so with choosing 3, they had over 200 combinations of different classes. But as the game grew and as the game got more explored and people discovered things, they discovered a majority of them were useless or just not as good as X combination.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how long it would take to sit down and just compare all like 200 potential options together.
It was crazy.
You have to get like 50 friends together to each make 4 individual classes with the combinations and go, okay, so
Yeah, the
what
meta
we're going to do is we're
yeah.
all going to video everything, and then we're going to spend the next month going through all the videos.
Oh yeah, it was wild because every game's got the people who really enjoy the number crunching side of things. They will get down to the nitty gritty and find like the best possible thing to do with whatever their class is and stuff like that. I am not one of those people. I will not spend hundreds of hours doing number crunching and research, but I like playing what feels good and what I just comes naturally, kind of.
Yeah. Penumbral says, if anyone wants to know what Gliding in Ashes is going to be like, Arcade is the game to play. Well worth the time.
I would agree.
Yeah.
It's still fun.
The more and more
Yeah.
I actually hear about arcades, the more and more it seems like this is going to be very much like an arcade branch, so to say, like where it could have branched off to at some point in the development right before launching.
I can say like a take on it in a way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like if they
I see.
decided to not focus on adding like a third archetype and some other things that they've done and doing the pay to win stuff and all that, going more towards how about we spend all that development time on making nodes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, it's not very far off because I think Steven was a very big enjoyer of arcade, so I could see that not being too far off the path there.
Yeah.
This one is actually very similar, however, a little bit of a different direction with the same type of question. This one comes from Reddit, from YKZ Drop Dead. and it's about class versus role fulfillment. And just to preface this, Steven, or Intrepid rather, already responded saying, who can tank really depends on the setting. So for high-end raids and dungeons, the best tanks will be players with the tank as their primary archetype, and then linked to a timestamp in their last development update live stream where they were talking about that a little bit more. But the direction that they were trying to go in was, in general, being able to choose what you were doing with your primary secondary class. So for example, anybody with a secondary of tank could be able to tank for a group, or like should be able to, but vice versa, if you had a tank fighter, it would be cool, or it would be an interest of theirs to be able to be on par with the DPS versus so much on par with the tank. So being able to do as much damage as a lot of the DPS were doing. And then similarly with like a bard, instead of being just a support class, being able to have like a ranger cleric who went around and was like a support and or healer for the group, and just kind of blurring those lines a little bit more is kind of the direction that this person goes.
I don't really know, because I'm so like, I'm gonna tangent a little bit.
Of course.
As you both know, I'm a tank through and through.
Yeah.
I've been an MMO tank for over 25 years, and I learned to tank from the old dudes playing EverQuest back in the day.
Yeah, old school.
Classic, like, because back then, the I feel like part of the reason why we've gone the way we've gone now, where even in like Final Fantasy, the tanks that aren't doing the most damage are bottom tier, because damage numbers can be recorded and checked with DPS meters.
Right.
Back then, back in the like EverQuest days and stuff like that, we didn't have DPS meters. They didn't exist.
Right.
So it was all just guesswork, figuring out what worked. So back then, tanks weren't expected to do the same amount of DPS as the rest of the DPS, because our job at a baseline was keep mobs off everybody else and position the bosses properly.
Right.
As long as we were doing that, it was up to the DPS at that point.
Right.
I don't necessarily dislike the route that we've gone, where tanks are expected to do damage at this point, but I could go either way. For me, as long as I'm holding my job and no one's dying and not getting attacked by trash or a boss, we'll see. Because, we've also never had an MMO with an 8-person party.
Right.
So that's going to change a lot of factors, at least in my head, because most MMOs are either 4-man parties or 5-man parties. So
Yeah.
we've got the option now. Somebody was asking me this actually earlier today. We've got the option now for an 8-person party makeup. So 1 tank, 5 DPS, 2 healers.
Right.
Would be probably what most people are going to run. If they can get away with it, 1 tank, 1 healer, 6 DPS.
Yeah.
Right. And also conversely, just to add before Vertec jumps in, healers also were going from just doing their job of making sure the party was healed to also, like, at least in retail WoW, dealing damage as well.
In Final Fantasy too.
Yeah.
The whole Sage class in Final Fantasy is all around shielding your party and dealing damage.
Yeah, kind of like a disc priest in a way.
Yeah, they straight up built a damage dealing healer. And now, because they've done that, Sage is top tier. Nobody wants the other healers because Sage can do damage.
Right. It changes the game in that sense. Vertec, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's so many people out there, and this is totally an opinion that's it's kind of rooted in there, and change my mind or whatever. But I think there's a lot of people that just kind of want to be able to do anything with any class they want. And I think that kind of robs the core of RPGs, because what are you going to play? A rogue. Okay, cool, you're a rogue. Let's go, let's fight. And the rogue's like, okay, I'm going to heal you. But you can't, because you're a rogue. Yeah, but I want to heal you. Why can't I? Because you're rogue. That's what you are. It's like...
Exactly.
Okay, I'm gonna fix the Hummer because it broke down. But you're a veterinarian. You didn't study anything about cars. We have a mechanic right here. The mechanic is gonna fix the car. You're a veterinarian. Let the mechanic fix the car.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you try to make it to where everybody can do everything, there's no role identity.
Yeah, like that's why you choose that class. You're choosing a class, or in this case, an archetype, based on what you want to do, what role you want to fill. You choose your secondary archetype. Yeah, what if you're rogue cleric? Remember we were talking about that. That's going to be the... That's going to be the... Oh no, that's right. It was cleric rogue. That was going to be the raid healer. Yeah, I came up with a wild idea last time where a cleric rogue could... cast like this slight little invisibility on people when they heal to try to reduce all their threat. So it'd be like the threat dropping healer.
That's pretty cool.
Start like doing heavy heal casts on the big DPS that are throwing big numbers and big threat, and just that's what most of their heal is going towards, is reducing that person's threat.
And while they're doing that, they can pickpocket the boss.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, rogue cleric could be fun though too. Like as you're hitting them with like your poisons or your dots or whatever, a portion of that is healing you back.
Yeah. Like on the same tangent, did either of you play Rift?
I did not.
Did not.
Rift is one of the only MMOs where I actually mained a healer. And the healer... Oh gosh, I need to look now. The healer was Chloromancer. That was what it was called. And the Chloromancer in Rift, their whole scheme was healing based off the damage they did. So your main ability was like this channeled beam that you would beam at a boss, and when you channeled that beam, you would radiate healing to everyone else.
Interesting.
It was super unique and super fun to play, because you had like normal healing spells. Like I could target the tank and throw a heal, but my primary purpose was to do damage while continuously healing everybody. So it plays off of that same topic that we're talking about of blending the roles.
Right.
Yeah, and see that's something I've always had an idea on how it would how nice it would feel and how fun it would feel to be something like a necromantic healer, where you're literally pulling one life out of one or more creatures and channeling it into others, like quite literally just force feeding it from one person to another. And how neat that would be, because then you could set up like little dots over a room full of creatures and directing all that health to a tank that's trying to tank all the baddies.
Yeah, something like you could set up like for example, like a Holy Paladin's beacon. That's what it's called. Holy Paladin's beacon of light. Set that on somebody, and then all your dots that you put on channel that healing to whoever has your beacon.
Oh,
Small bean.
Hi.
Bean.
Thank you for the raid.
Yes, thank you for the raid.
I may have.
Big old can of raid has been opened.
Hold up. Let me do this real quick. There we go.
You'll have to defend against the raid.
There's a raid coming in. Hide behind the tables.
Wicca's over there legitimately hiding behind the table.
Welcome in, friends. We are talking about Ashes of Creation with WiccaSloth here. And for those that don't know who we are, what we do, we are a community-oriented podcast. And we often pull a lot of our conversations straight from the Reddit forums and Twitter of the Ashes of Creation community. So a lot of our stuff is talking about things and stuff and asking our guest what their thoughts are on things, while also seeing your responses in chat. So more like hide behind the tank.
Hold on, let me cast Aegis.
Oh wait, hold on, 1 second.
But
There you go.
Yeah, there it is. I forgot we had that one.
Mm-hmm.
Forgot we got that one done.
Yep, I'm here for the mead. Maybe some apple cider. We have a little bit of apple cider left.
Yeah, we have much more mead left.
Yes. Welcome in, friends.
But yeah, kind of what we were talking about before.
The blurring the lines between the primary secondaries.
Yeah, I think it's really fun to blur some lines, but some people are even like how this one that we're talking about right now was phrased. Like if a knight, a tank fighter, picks up a two-handed sword and swaps their build to do more damage, should they be able to be on par or close to being on par to DPS archetype class? I think absolutely not. I think they should be able to do adequate DPS, like not be a detriment to the party, but they should have much more of a kit based around the tank archetype that is their primary. So they can do more control and whatnot while they're DPSing, but their DPS is going to be okay-ish. As one person's name here, the okayest Jeff. Yeah, it's going to be the okayest DPS. It's not going to be worth kicking, but it's not going to be worth inviting them to do their particular type of damage. No.
Yes, you guys are always welcome to ask our guests and us questions. We may not always get to them immediately, but we do save them to ask during the appropriate times. We tend to keep it on topic for what we're talking about, and then we get to a random section later.
Well, it takes 6 ever.
Yeah, I know. But
time and a half.
So this kind of goes into us a little bit introducing you. So the okayest Jeff wants to know what you will be doing when Ashes of Creation launches.
Well, so for those who don't know, I did play an Alpha 1. I played the crap out of Alpha 1. I will be playing Alpha 2 as well. I'll also be streaming a lot of Alpha 2 because I have a few people. So I actually, funny enough, when Ashes was doing when they were doing the charity stream, I actually won one of their giveaways. I didn't need the code, so they asked me if I wanted to give it to somebody, and I actually gave it to Solar.
Nice.
So Solar is going to be testing in Alpha 2 with me and doing a bunch of stuff. But I've had a lot of people ask me if I plan on running a guild, so I've had enough interest to where I will be. I've done it many times. I've ran many guilds over the years. It's nothing new. I know how to do it. I know how to handle organization. I know how to, I was also a raid leader for a very long time. I can do all of this. It's going to be a lot of fun. And what we're going to try to do is hopefully Ashes does the smart thing where they will announce servers, then give people time to pick servers. And I will be in talks with these two lovely folks and try to coordinate so that we all end up on the same server.
Yeah.
And then hopefully alliance between the two of us, because you guys plan on running a guild too, right?
We're actually a part of a guild.
Yeah.
We're a part of Nexus.
Running a podcast is enough for us.
Yeah.
So gonna try to at least ally with them and try to get things figured out that way. As far as the rest of it goes, I want to experience every piece of content we can get our hands on. Everything. I wanna do all the raid content, dungeon content, castle sieges, node sieges. I want to do everything.
You and we makes 3 for sure. We're all about trying to test out all the things. Like everyone keeps asking me, like, what archetype? What archetype are you most excited about? Tank. Okay, what class? All of them.
All of them.
Anything tank/X.
Yes, tank/X or X/tank. I'm gonna try all of them.
I'm gonna be making 16 characters on Alpha 2 to try them all out.
That is fair.
Really curious to see what like the tank mage and tank bard combinations, like even the reverse, like the mage tank and bard tank.
So to not to try to tangent too much, but mildly tangent, I play a very, very tiny, small indie MMO on my off time called Project Gorgon, and in that game, it's similar but different. It's all skill based, so you pick 2 skills, and that determines what your skills are in your action bars. And I play a class that no one else ever plays, and I combined Bard and Shield to make a tank. So it's very interesting, and I really want to get my hands on Bard tank in Ashes and see what that plays like, or tank Bard and Bard tank. It should be fun. A full-fledged tank that throws out group buffs. Oh, that might be hard to pass up.
I just think it'd be a whole lot of fun to be a bard, running around doing the group buffing and the this and that, and then at the same time while you're just prancing around through the party, tossing out buffs and, you know, helping the group do better things in one way, shape, or form, just dropping the shield right into something's face and like, no, sit down.
Yeah, like because you can strap a shield to your arm, right, and still have your hand free and like play a heart, you know, like.
Yes.
Kind of hook you guys back in here, and that was actually a perfect little segue. The next topic is about Ashes of Creation incorporating all level of players in node warfare. So talking about like group buffs and things like that. This person, Caselli, I'm not sure how to say their name, I'm sorry. It's off of the forums here, and they were talking about like how will Ashes of Creation handle a level 20 going up potentially like a level 50 and a node like a castle siege or something like that. And their idea was to have maybe more of a, instead of a fixed amount of players, having it set to be a combined level between everybody. I'm not really sure if this is the right way to even go about it, but it was an interesting topic. Like, how could a level 20 be helpful against a bunch of level 50s in a castle siege? And vice versa. Like, if you're sieging a castle, if you're level 20 going up against some level 50s that are like defending it. What are your thoughts?
It's there's games out there who try to do stuff like this. It works most of the time. Like, you either it's more or less one of two ways. You either scale up or you scale down. So if I honestly prefer scaling up. So you take the level 20s and bring them up to like a base level 50 in that scenario. That way they don't feel weak. They don't feel like they're not helpful. But it has its drawbacks. Right. It's a hard one to try to balance and figure out, because
it is,
you know, because it can go either way. I'm a fan of scaling up for certain scenarios like that, because like, for example, in Final Fantasy 14 there are fate events that happen all throughout the world, and if you're too high level, the fate will ask you to scale down. And what scaling down for a high level does is it locks out half your action bar. So a bunch of your skills that you unlock at certain levels now you can't use during this event. Right. So I think it could work either way. It just really depends on what the community feels is better. I don't mind either way, to be honest. Just hopefully it works well.
I kind of like the more immersive idea and feeling of, you don't really adjust their levels, but you just add objectives that lower levels can complete, like running supplies around town to help fortify the walls. And, you know, if they're going to man, say, a ballista on the castle wall, that ballista would fire and take as much damage as it normally would, no matter what level is manning it. So get out there and jump on a catapult or something.
True.
You know, go man the boulder launcher. Get on the ballista, run some supplies, take medical supplies from the sound square, I guess, where they're collecting them all out to the walls to help heal up some guards and sentries that were out there. NPCs defending the wall and heal them up. Like a level 20 could totally do that. As long as you can run, you can do that. So
100%.
That would give them a purpose and also give them a chance to witness things that are going on, especially if it's their first time leveling up through a character. It'll give them a chance to witness what exactly is happening. Like run the medical supplies out to the wall and then climb up on the top of the wall and just watch everything go on. Like, holy crap, this is intense. And then they get blasted off the wall by a catapult boulder flying at the castle wall. And then they realize that they shouldn't have climbed up there. But
yeah.
I like that idea too.
And the thing that the OP was trying to kind of point out is that when not all levels are equally important in Node Warfare, then the game for that type of gameplay will be purely max level only, meaning that new players entering into that kind of content would be lower because you have to get up to 50 first to be able to participate in that kind of thing. And Nick R ends up saying in response to that, essentially what Vertec was saying. Like in both node wars and sieges, every single citizen participates. So potentially there could be some sort of war goal purely for the lower level characters. But I mean, ultimately it's not something that Intrepid has really talked on or spoken on a whole lot. And I'd be interested in seeing the direction they go about it. I know that they want everybody to have a role. But how impactful that role would be and how viable that would be for all players of all levels is something that I'd be interested in seeing how they handle it. And another thing that was suggested was a lobby being able to handle maybe like a siege like machine or like some sort of siege weapon, be it like a catapult or something like that. Where they can safely hide behind the castle walls but still be able to do a good amount of damage utilizing something like that.
Ooh, you know what else would be neat is if there were upgrades you could make to certain weapons and certain defenses or certain offenses for that matter, and the level 20s and 10s and whatnot could sit in the back line and process those upgrades. Things like making the tar and slapping on the boulders or whatever they're slinging in the catapults and lighting them on fire, but without somebody back there, making the tar, mixing it, heating it up, applying it, and lighting it. That upgrade just wouldn't exist. So having some low levels do that is ideal.
Yeah, and I know that they're trying to make it a thing that all players can be participating of or in, and I'm interested in seeing how they implement it because it doesn't seem like an easy thing to solve. And this is part of the reason why when people are like, why isn't Alpha 2 out yet? Well, they're still probably trying to figure out the logistics behind these things. So, which I'm going to touch on that a little later in the random topics, but I wanted to kind of go over, and I'm going to utilize the one and only Ash's news piece that I have to kind of bridge the gap here. And in their most recent dev discussions, they have the new topic on, let me just grab the actual link here, not the Reddit link to the link. But training is when players pull enemy NPCs onto... Wait, is it training? Yeah. Onto other players in hopes that it will kill them. I don't know why that's called training. Interesting. Some players see this as valid and fun combat tactics to play around, and some do not. Would you like to see mechanics that support or discourage training in Ash's creation? Why is it called training?
Choo-choo.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking of like the other kind of training where you're like practicing training.
Yeah. So
Hey, Zuko.
Training was a huge thing in EverQuest because mobs didn't have leashes.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So
Training, got it.
So another fun one for those who didn't play EverQuest back in the day. Most games we know nowadays run on the holy trinity of tank, healer, DPS.
Right.
EverQuest had 5.
Ooh.
It was tank, healer, DPS, support, and pullers. So tanks didn't run and pull their own mobs. They had classes for that.
Interesting.
So monks, for example, were super fast, and monks could run around and literally gather an entire zone and pull it back because there were no leashes.
Right. Okay.
So when a monk would do this in a zone that was for leveling purposes, they would yell "choo choo" in the chat.
Okay.
because if that train of mobs just happened to run over a low level or a mid level, they were probably dead. So I am a fan of mobs having leashes.
Yeah.
That way we don't have to relive those horror days, because most people who played EQ back in the day probably have a horror story about getting bowled over by a train of mobs.
Probably. I can imagine that.
Especially if they have no idea why someone's yelling choo choo.
Yeah, because
Right.
it was so common. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of bad stuff too. But as far as in Ashes goes, and like having mitigations against training, I think it's a good thing. I don't think, for example, someone should be able to run and pull like an entire zone, or like you shouldn't be able to run around an entire ZOI and gather up everything and kill it. Like it's an old style of gameplay that hasn't aged well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
having, like we saw in the tank preview, when they ran far enough away, the mobs would leash and go back. I think that's how it should be. I like the leashing. It's a good thing.
So, and given that definition of training, which is very much, as you guys saw, not what I thought it was. I was very confused. I feel like that's just zerging, but using NPCs to do it.
Yeah.
Like, instead of me killing you and ganging up on you, I'm using a bunch of mobs to do it for me, which is, and I agree with Sunshine, just as toxic.
Yeah, it's not a good thing. Like, if you're going out and trying to train mobs to kill other players, it's just as bad as PK.
Yeah.
It's
that's, to me, that sounds like a way around getting red.
Yeah, it's an exploit. Instead of going red, you're just being a shithead.
It's okay, we're marked as mature, you can say that.
Oh, thank God.
But yeah, it would also give them just a chance to get who knows how many gatherers or whatever just completely murdered.
Oh,
and
yeah,
drop the stuff on the ground without making any real effort on their own, especially if they're like a rogue that can vanish out of combat, and then all the mobs go back to what they were doing after mowing down 6 people gathering herbs in a field.
Yeah.
But the biggest issue that I have with that, though, is when people run that through towns. Because, you feel you're in a town, it's a place of relative safety. Even a metropolis, you'd think it'd be relative safety. But if there's, say, 100, 200 different mobs that they're gathering from the zone or just around the town, and they run through town, the guards aren't going to be able to extinguish all of them unless it's a one-hit kill on every single creature. And that's it. So they're still going to make a little bit of mayhem in there. People think they're safe hanging around at like the bank or whatever, and they just get plopped over, and it's not even like it was a valid PvP exercise where people were trying to gather like 40 people to run through and barrage a node or anything, which is totally a valid thing to do. Sure, let's go and like take out all their shopkeepers. Let's injure the town. Let's take out their ability to do quests. Let's go for it.
Also,
but then you have to be stronger than the town guards.
Right. For those of you watching, I put up a poll just now asking what you guys think on the subject. Are you for it? Are you against it? Does it kind of depend for you?
It's gonna be World of Warcraft boss training all over again.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Vertec, you have collision and AOC though, right? So a narrow street is a major choke point. I don't know what RS is. What is
narrow
RS?
street.
RuneScape, okay. No one wants to catch a XP debt AFK in a city getting food. Yeah, absolutely. I think there should be some, in my opinion, there should be some places where you can't get XP debt. Like, you shouldn't be able to be chained into a city and then let those mobs zerg the city, especially. If this were to be a thing, you can't unleash, like, patchwork onto a city and just watch them attack people.
Like straight up, like back in old WoW days, there's a world boss spawns like 3 zones away from a city. People would bring it all the way into Stormwind.
Jeez.
And just kill everyone.
Right, because isn't there AI like, oh, you're the next one alive near me, you're dead. You're the next one around me, you're dead. Same WoW city, some WoW city monster obliteration nonsense. Yeah, absolutely. I always hated when enemies would bait guards into your aggro radius and use them as cover fire to attack you for free. Oh yeah, absolutely. Been in SW doing that, and it was not fun, I imagine. In PvP, yeah. I honestly, like, my favorite thing about guards is when they actually do stuff. Like, if I am running into a city and there are guards there, I would like you to attack whoever's attacking me, please, or whatever is attacking me, please. I am clearly running for my life if I'm almost dead. This is how I try to narrowly escape death, is by running back into a city.
and if they do it like I hope they do it, guards will have a skill set.
Yeah.
Like, guards will have like an AoE. Like, guards will be able to, like, if they give everybody a class or an archetype, at least, they should potentially have the ability to use more or less the same abilities we do,
right?
Which would help prevent a lot of that mob training, especially if the guards are like standard city guards where they're like max level.
Yeah, I like the max level elite idea, where it takes a couple of one like level of people to take down that level of, like, so like 3 or 4 level 50s to take down 150 elite guard or something like that. And then of course, as you're fighting guards, other guards get aggroed onto you because you're fighting a guard. Like, that's the protection system.
Guards have the ability to like call for help.
Yeah, absolutely. But like also sorry, go ahead.
I was just trying to go back to the collision and AOC. Kind of rapidly branched off from that and ran. But so there's going to be collision and AOC. Narrow Street is going to be a major choke point, but think back also on what they were talking about with some of the technology with pathing. The way that they've geared everything is so that NPCs can get the entire mesh of the entire zone dropped in at once, instead of having to get only what's near them. So if there is, say, a narrow alleyway coming up, and they start to realize that there's a whole bunch of creatures in the way and a whole bunch of things blocking it, they're going to start overflowing around it and finding other ways to get where they want to go.
Yeah.
So it may not be that much of a blockage, but yeah, it'll be a small choke point for a minute anyway.
I was also just going to go back to the original topic, and actually there's a lot of people on the Reddit that are agreeing with us. Like, a couple of the top voted ones are one's from Doge Bless USA, who says, if you do that, it's going to be used 100% for griefing, and there's no other use for it other than to annoy a player until they leave. It's a dumb mechanic that has no gameplay benefits. You should keep annoying and time-wasting stuff out of the game as much as possible. This is not 2002. People are not going to settle for shit game mechanics because there's nothing else to play or do. And then,
not to mention,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, just to feed off of that, the one instance where I can see it having any other purpose besides griefing is in Eastern RPGs. Where
but this is
grinding is life, and so pulling an entire zone and trying to murderize them all down into one big hamburger patty all at once, and then going and grabbing them all again, that's just kind of how they do things.
Right, and this is the opposite. This is Western MMO experience, right? So like, it doesn't really have a place. Like, I get the grindingness, but I hope it's not to the level that Eastern MMOs are. And then Ren Red said, why is this even a question? Training would be a way to circumvent corruption, which is what I was saying. I'm all for PvP, but this will be used most of the time as cheap griefing. If there's a system that allows you to ignore corruption while killing someone outside of oceans and other PvP areas, it should be treated as an exploit and be removed, which is exactly what we were saying. So it's nice to see that a lot of the people are saying, like, I really don't think training is a fun or interesting mechanic, or if a player aggroes a mob and drags it over to a player B and player B doesn't take any combat actions to join the fight, then player B should not automatically be put on its aggro table. That's the most abusive form of training. And multiple conversation topics, at least on the Reddit, towards that feeling. So it seems like in general, the community is against that. And I think rightfully so. If we're trying to avoid griefing, we should definitely not put any free tickets to griefing mechanics into the game.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And they've already talked about how mob grinding is not going to be an effective way to level.
Yeah.
That's the only other use for it.
Yeah. And I like that World of Warcraft is like that too. Like, sure, you can grind mobs, but it's going to be less effective than just going and doing some quests.
Yeah. It's just like Final Fantasy. Like, and you ask anybody, how do I play Final Fantasy 14? Do the main story. You never have to grind a mob ever. You just follow the quest chain.
Right. And I'm interested in seeing how Ashes ends up doing like that. But we're going to move into, from that, more of the specific combat topics. And this is one that we've heard multiple times. In fact, Maggie even mentioned something about this previously in regards to the new office space. But this comes from Reddit, from Zafrod, talking about motion cap being sorely needed. I'm not going to create a wall of text about this. I love the look of this game, and I think the direction and art style is heading in a great place, I think is what they're saying. I just think that the animations we have seen so far are not lifelike at all. I do not know if motion capture is something Intrepid is considering or planning to use in the future iterations, but I personally think it's sorely needed. And we've seen this before. If you've played Ghost of Tsushima, that uses mocap. And it was really, really cool to see the behind the scenes of it. And, people were like, hey, there's no way that like anybody could actually do that. And then they released a video somewhere behind the scenes of the guy that they literally had doing the mocap doing the exact same thing as a side by side with the in-game person.
Yeah. As far as I think they've brought it up, like they said, basically mocap's expensive. And I don't know, like I'm on a really weird hill of like, I'm not worried about how good the game looks graphically or like fidelity wise, stuff like that. As long as the gameplay is good and the content is good, I'm there for it. I'm down. Well, I mean, I think they should make it look as good as they possibly can, and I think they're doing that.
Yeah, I would agree.
Like, and of course, everything we've seen up to now is subject to change and is obviously all early stage development. So these animations are going to get reworked and polished 100 more times before they're finished. Right. So I think it's way too early to not say they're decent. Yeah. Like, I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but it's not. We haven't even hit Alpha 2 yet. Like, we're still in the alpha phases. And some will be scrapped entirely. Like for the fireball animation. Right. You guys remember the original fireball animation where you went up in the air, spun, then cast the fireball, and everybody had a riot about it because it was too much. Right. Yeah. It's that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a thing that they should sit down and run numbers on it and try to see legitimately how long it would take to have somebody go through and do animation to make something look kind of good versus doing motion capture and paying somebody to come in who knows, say, sword play, and for a day you're gonna get a couple $100. That's what you're gonna get. You're gonna get a practice sword, and you're gonna get in this silly looking suit with a bunch of dots and lines and X's all over your body. and you're just going to do sword forms. But you know what? That's potentially the easiest couple $100 you're ever going to make. You know what? Make it $1,000. Make it $1,000. Come in for a day and do sword forms. You know, some with a shield in one hand, some with a shield and I don't know, like a fist weapon if they're going to have those. Another one with like a two-handed weapon, and just do some sword forms. There you go. Motion cap that. Boom. That part's done. Now they just got to take the skeleton that results from the mocap and fit it to these models, or vice versa. Versus somebody sitting there as an artist and needing to animate and then reanimate and then view and get ideas and then reanimate and adjust and tweak. How many days are they going to be spending on that? Versus just taking the motion capture and then tweaking it a little bit to make it work with all the other animations that they're putting together from one to the next. This is of course me saying this as someone who has no idea what it actually costs to do motion capture or how long it actually takes them to get these animations down, but just throwing it out there, I just did a big project to automate some spreadsheets that gathered data from PDFs that we made at the job to capture how many different devices are in an entire building and then categorize everything into easily, you know, number crunchy things. And it took me, I want to say, like a month worth of my time to make that. But every single job that came in, it saved at least 2 or 3 days. At a minimum, 2 or 3 days worth of time. So it was a big chunk of money right off the bat, but saved a lot of time down the line.
Here's an idea, and I'm going to kind of get into my thoughts, and then I'd like to get into what some of the people are commenting on the posts are saying. But here's something. So we have games like, or systems like Unreal Engine and Unity, where you can get these pre-made packages, right? What if somebody made a package that was mocap, where people went through and they know that things like Unreal Engine is being used for making video games, and somebody went out and they made these packages where it's already been designed. You can just use whatever mocap things they have and then import that into your game so that you already have it and you don't have to individually buy that resource. I think that could be something that'd be viable and also sustainable long term, in terms of like that one person could make a lot of money for whoever ends up buying that package from them. And additionally, those companies or people that are buying that package are saving a lot of money by not having to go and get somebody to go and do mocap themselves, especially for something like a sword swing. Now, in Ghost of Tsushima, where it's a very particular style of fighting, such as, you know, the Japanese katana style of fighting, that is a little bit more specialized. So you're probably going to want somebody who's an expert in that to specifically come in and do those attacks. But in your typical Roman Empire, European, you know, type of fighting, there's not too many unique forms comparatively. If everybody's doing that one, which is a very common thing to base your MMO off of, then, you know, you swing your sword in a certain manner. That was just like my little food for thought that I wanted to add out there, as being a potential. But some of what the chat is saying is, looking at the basic attack, this is from Homely Bonfire, looking at the basic attack motions for dagger and broadswords, I thought the animators were great, or the animations were great, and I'm optimistic that within this year or the other animations will come up to that level as well. Going for motion capturing, in my opinion, seems like an unnecessary drain of funds and prolonging the development phase even more. But with that being said, I'm not looking for quote-unquote realistic in this game. I just want nice aesthetics, and more than anything, I hope for fun social MMORP mechanics. And somebody else said, not only will it be a drain of funds, but it won't help. They've said that they're using a split body root motion hybrid animation system, which means that motion capture will get split up, layered, and blended together. Plus, the more exaggerated style would mean every animation would have to be gone over by an animator anyway, making the motion capture a marginal time saver at best and an expensive reference video at worst.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to go into, is getting the person and getting them in the suit to do the thing is not the expensive part. The expensive part is having all the camera equipment, the stage to do it on, and finding a place to do it, because most of the time to do motion capture, you're going to actually go to another studio's location where they have all that equipment and they have it all set up, because it takes hours to set all that stuff up every single day.
Yeah. Unless like Intrepid were to somehow have a special part of the studio dedicated to just mocap.
Yeah, if they invested, like not gonna lie, like if they invested money to get like a whole mocap setup, you're looking at $200 million.
Yeah.
Like getting mocap, like in-house mocap, is really expensive. So the cheapest option for them to do mocap would be to outsource. But like that person said, I think the animations look fantastic so far.
Yeah.
And I also agree with, I'm not looking for realistic, because fantasy setting, it doesn't have to be realistic. Plus, in real, like there's stuff I've watched about like giant swords. We have warriors swinging two-handed swords that a normal human could never possibly lift.
Right.
So how do you properly animate that, or how do you properly get someone to do that with mocap, but like a foam sword, where the mocap's not going to have the same weight and feeling. I don't really like those terms, but the same weight and feeling that you would get with just an animator going over it and making sure it looks good. As long as it looks good and it functions properly, I think that's the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think kind of the thing that they're talking about, because I can definitely see in certain parts what they mean by, even when you look at the tank video, when they do what they call it, the harpoon thing. The way that he moves isn't quite, I mean, outside of the rope not being there at all, but the actual character's motion just doesn't, something about it just feels wrong with the way his arm moves. It doesn't seem natural. I mean, it's not horrendous, but it's off enough that enough of those type of movements together are like, okay, this doesn't feel accurate. It doesn't seem like it fits the aesthetic of the art that they're going with. If it were a totally stylized, like if this were, say, Wildstar, which had completely stylized graphics, right? Then the character's movements wouldn't really matter as much, because the whole thing looks cartoony anyway. But when they're going with a very realistic look and feel and texture for everything, and the ambience is very much like a high fantasy and rich environment, but then you have the characters moving very stiffly and such, which again, they're not looking terrible. It's not trying to say it does, but some of the movements I could see would benefit from mocap, but I would agree that it's very much would the money make it worthwhile or not?
Yeah, and
the cost
that kind of leads into the next topic, which is also from the Reddit by A Major Tomes. And he essentially is talking about asking the community thoughts on the basic attack speed, where he said, I really prefer to slow down the speed with which the player character attacks and increase the damage to compensate. I guess they just kind of feel like the speed is a little too fast for what they're doing, which I kind of get that. Like some of those movements are very quick, but he likes Guild Wars 2. There's something he hates about it as how difficult it can be to gauge your movement to moment damage. Your moment to moment damage, sorry. And your auto attacks hit so quickly that the numbers blend together and each strike loses impact because of it.
I kind of agree with that. Like I like where the animations are going, and I know that they're all still very much early and they're going to get changed and evolved, but slowing down the attack speed, I kind of feel is like a good thing. Like, especially with like the dual daggers in that showcase, they were fast. They're supposed to be fast. They're small. You're supposed to be agile and quick. But if you slow that down a little, like cut that speed down just a little bit, I think it feels better. That's just me personally. Like, if the attack speed is so fast that you can't track where you're going, or you can't track your damage numbers, like if the damage numbers are like just coming up so fast and overlapping, like,
yeah,
especially like also with like the greatsword, like those swings feel pretty fast, or they seem pretty fast in comparison to like they said they want to add weight to things and make things feel good. That greatsword's got to be probably like take out superhuman strength, or like fantasy character strength. That sword's got to be 80 to 100 pounds.
Right. There's no way you're swinging that fast in a circle like that without that sword flying off.
Oh yeah.
Or taking you with it.
Right. But it's that delicate balance between high fantasy and realism.
Right.
And the more what I've discovered from games and tabletop and stuff like that, especially in like tabletop, the more realism you go for, the more speed you lose.
Right.
Like a great short example is there's a tabletop game that is like a Western where you have like gun duels, and like for standard D&D is broken down into 6-second turns.
Right.
This game that is highly realistic, like hyper realistic with gun duels, is broken down to 1/6 of a second turns.
Wow.
So the more realism you go for, the more you lose speed.
Right. That makes sense. Bartek, what's your thoughts?
I think it's a very tough balance, because with all the games that I've tested throughout my years of gaming, which again it must be like 4 or 5 years of my gaming career, let's call it a career. Let's pretend I was doing something worthwhile. There were many different games I played that took different approaches. Some of them were a realistic, quote unquote, like combat speed. And they were very boring to play. It didn't feel exciting pressing a button and waiting 2 seconds to be able to push another with a greatsword that you're swinging around like that. It didn't feel good at all. Not in any way, shape, or form. It felt very boring, and nobody played the two-handers at all, because it was so just like shwonk, shwonk, shwonk. And combat felt very grueling and meh as compared to the fast stuff and whatnot. But at the same time, could they deal with a little bit faster paced with the smaller weapons and slower paced with the bigger weapons? I could definitely see that being something could go into decisions of how you want to play and what weapons you want to use. Like you could have, say, a 1.5 second global cooldown for a two-hander and a 0.75 second global cooldown for the short little daggers.
Yeah.
It could take literally twice as long to do a second attack with the big sword.
Honestly,
but once you start hitting that like 2 second length, then it gets kind of a little bit excessive.
Honestly, I don't want them to slow it down like a tremendous amount, but right there, that spin to win that he does, it's so fast for holding a two-wheeled or two-hand that it feels like looking at him, like it feels the weight of like a dagger easily.
Oh, yeah.
Versus being slowed down, even just like a little bit, like a half a second slowdown, I think would do a big difference with that, because it is a heavier thing that you have to really hold on tight to spin in that manner. And then you have to have a lot of strength to stay in place as you do the spin to win and not like get thrown off kilter from the weight of the thing you're twirling around.
There's a fun thing about that, because if you guys can check this out later if you want to. There's a channel called Shadowversity. This man, he does realistic, accurate combat simulations and things like that. And one of the series he's actually making right now is about giant swords. He actually makes a two-handed model, like accurate. It's probably like a 6.5 foot sword, and spins with it. And he discovers with physics that It's actually very easy to, instead of swinging over your head like you would do with a normal sword, like we would do,
Right.
It actually makes more sense to spin your entire body, because equilibrium and the force pulling against you.
Right.
So if you're swinging your entire body around and leaning back into that swing, or leaning back away from that swing, you actually can keep yourself very balanced. while
Yay,
you do
physics.
It's actually super cool.
I love physics for that. I don't like the math behind physics, but I love physics for that.
I love it. It's so cool. Some of the stuff people do is so cool.
Yeah.
So, but I agree that it's a little fast.
Yeah. Ashes and Air says my main beef with the current animation is it's too fast a speed when swinging, and when the character is holding a shield, they swing the shield all the way back behind and then up, which just looks really silly to them.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could agree, because like you want them to be realistic to a point. Like hyper realistic, I don't know if that's necessary, but I think at least with the daggers, I feel like the animators did a very good job with really accentualizing how quick and fast that movement is, because a rogue class is very high mobility, high get in, get your damage done, get back out. You know, like it's just it's a very fast-paced class to play, versus like the ranger that's aims and like studies and then shoots for like harder damage kind of thing. And I feel like that is important to get down in the way that it looks. And I didn't really have that opinion beforehand, but looking at this and then reading what people are saying, like it kind of brings it a little bit more forefront in my mind of like, oh yeah, that's right. That you make a very loud clang. But yeah, like I just think it's one of those things, like I didn't quite realize how fast it was, but looking at what they're holding and things like that, yeah, like it would make sense that you would maybe not be as fast as daggers, but you could have some speed there, just maybe not quite that fast, because how fast he's going, I imagine I'd be super dizzy, and I don't know if I could even go that quickly.
I agree, especially in like the tank showcase when he's using a moderately sized one-handed hammer and a tower shield.
Yeah.
With how quickly he's moving that tower shield around, it doesn't look very realistic.
Yeah.
But that's the thing in a lot of games. A lot of games don't do very well is animating that offhand.
Yeah.
That shield, especially for like a tank in a tank scenario, you're not going to want to drop that shield that much.
Yeah.
You're not like, nobody who uses a shield in the world ever has gone, aha. You just don't do that. You keep that shield in front of you as much as you can, and you can still attack with a shield in front of you.
Right.
It's that delicate balance of realism and fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of takes me over to the next topic, which is like the spell effects and readability of the different weapons that people are using. And I feel like slowing that down will help a little bit with the readability, but also the flashiness of all of the things. And Vertec and I, we've talked about this last week and the weeks before about how we're hoping that the brightness level of this is the max so people can dial it back. Essentially, knowing like it will not get brighter than this. This will be the maximum crazy that it might be, and it can be dialed back from here.
I hope so, because as someone who plays Final Fantasy XIV at the end game level, oh man, also as someone who has vertigo.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy has a huge problem with their animations, because you got spell effects from everything and they're all going off at once, and the mob just looks like a beacon.
Yeah.
Because you can't even see what's happening because there's so many spell effects going off constantly all around you. Right. Especially when you take in the fact you've got in the bigger ones, you've got 48 players all doing animations, all doing spell effects, plus a boss or trash mobs doing spell effects and animations. it's so excessive. It does not have to be that big and flashy. Thankfully they've said they're giving us settings to turn all of this stuff down or disable some of it, hopefully, like because a lot of they can make the game as pretty as they want to, and I hope they make it pretty, but the people who play at a serious endgame level are gonna turn off a lot of the stuff anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Vertek, I want to hear your thoughts on this too, but there were certain parts, even during this video here, where it's nothing but like a bright light section where the mob is. And so it makes it hard to like, okay, well, what is the mob doing? Where is the mob exactly? And, you know, in these type of games where you don't have a deadly boss mods letting you know that the AoE is about to be casted or something like that, being able to see what your mob is up to is a very big part of that. So what are your thoughts, Vertek?
Pretty much everything you just said.
Okay. And Ash as a nurse, sometimes the flash completely obscures the character too, which, yeah, that's fair. And you know, I think it's one of those important things. Like, I mean, yeah, you got the people with what is it called, with the too much flashiness, and they can get like they could get really sick off of it.
Vertigo.
There's vertigo, but then there's like another one, I thought.
Epilepsy.
Epilepsy.
Yeah, epilepsy.
And with how much flashiness is on the screen, like I'm just terrified somebody's gonna get hurt because of it. And you know, it's just, you know, with vertigo, with epilepsy, those are things that you have to be mindful of with the people that are playing your games. And obviously, I'm expecting them 1000% to be able to turn down these effects. But I hope.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
I think calling back to some of the statements they've made, they're trying to come up with identities for each of the archetypes.
Right.
As far as like the styling and coloring and just general aesthetics of skill effects.
Yeah.
What I'm kind of thinking and almost hoping is that what they're doing right now is just trying to dial in on the identity of each class, and each class is kind of being built up by different teams, and they're focusing mainly on how that class's abilities look rather than as a part of a party.
Right.
And maybe they'll start to kind of fine-tune them, because we've seen, even since the last video, the ranger and the fighter skills have been adjusted quite a bit in their visuals. Mm-hmm. If you were to go back and look at both of them, there was quite a bit of adjustment to both of them. So, including even one, unless it's a whole separate skill, the ranger's thing where he jumps up and leaves at the trail.
Yeah,
was it aerial strike or something?
On the ground? Yeah.
Yeah, it looks completely different, and it doesn't look as crazy and in your face in this tank video, because it doesn't have like that exploding green and whatnot as much as the first one did.
I feel like I noticed that without noticing that, if you know what I mean. Like, it was in one of those, like, I thought that was, like, a lot more noticeable last time I saw it, kind of, like, passing thought. But yeah, that kind of goes, I think, to your point. Like, they've made it noticeable without making it, like, in your face noticeable. Like, oh, okay, yeah, then he does that, but it's not like this big flashy thing. It's almost like you forgot that he did it half a second later because it wasn't so flashy.
And that's the thing, is every time I've noticed it in this video and I started to take mental note was after I saw it appear on the ground. It wasn't quite as crazy as it had been previously. Yeah, and that kind of leads into what I was gonna say, like, towards the end of my like little spurt, is like, I kind of hope that they look at this and then they just dial it back as like the standard, and then if you want the more crazy, you can dial it up, but if you don't want the more crazy, you can leave it be. Or if it's still too crazy for even you, for like, you know, specifically the sensitive people, like with the epilepsy and stuff, dial it back more so it's not so like it. I like that idea in general, as being able to scale it a little bit better for yourself particularly. Yeah, one setting I hope they do introduce is being able to hide specific effects, not even just turning them down or scaling them down, but like having the ability to hide other players' effects.
So you can
yeah.
still see your own, but you don't have to see all the effects of everybody else around you.
So here's the only thing, and I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. If we are planning on synergies and stuff, and you're hiding other people's effects, how are you going to know when they're casting it unless they're specifically in a voice chat with you?
Well, you could do multiple different setting choices where if you're like out in the open world, you disable other people's effects if you're just running around by yourself, or you could display only your party's effects.
I like that too. Yeah. Or even like how when he attacks things, at least in previous versions, there was like the numbers flying off to show like the damage that he was doing to it. Maybe it could have like when somebody does like a taunt, it'll say taunt as like one of the status effects that hits it. So that way it could also be for someone who maybe is not listening to the audio, is listening to their own music or whatever. They can see visually when somebody has taunted something. Or done another thing that they can kind of synergy with. I think that would be kind of a cool option as well.
Yeah, like in the cleric video, for example, like I forget who, I think it was Trad, walked up and went to do an ability, and he's like, "Oh, you won't see it because it's on my screen." I think it would be nice to see, like you were just saying, like when someone else staggers an enemy, it pops up staggered.
Right.
So that's another way you could indicate if someone else is using a certain ability.
Yeah.
That, like the status condition pops up, and you go, "Oh, I saw staggered. Now I can do this," and it should change the condition.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. Zaria says, I thought some abilities needed a little more transparency, but that may not help anything. Penumbral says, because in large-scale battles, it would be too much for 100 people to have their effects going off. Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of, like, the main part of what the community is worried about in general with these flashiness. Vertek, you sound like you had something you wanted to add.
I just got to the point where I actually saw him use that ground effects attack.
Okay, cool.
But, yeah, I'll just play this through from here. Just watch it as it goes by.
And I'm about 15 seconds behind Vertex, so you guys might hear me say stuff like 15 seconds later. But
like, there you go. I'll play it through again. I'll just keep hitting the back button after it lands.
And I do like that. I mean, we're highlighting the fact that I think Steven died, or somebody I think maybe died. I don't know. But yeah, it's one of those like, it's noticeable, but it's like, it's noticeable in not a flashy manner, and I like that. I like the noticeable yet not flashy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't have like the giant green like poofs of everything that was like exploding above the ground beforehand.
I think it'd be cool if specifically for yourself you saw those green flashy things, but like on other people you saw what like we just saw there, where it doesn't have that green flashiness. But for yourself, that flashiness can indicate like which one's yours particularly. Like imagine having two different rangers, and you could see which one was your particular strike because of the color effect being applied to it versus the not color effect being applied to the other people's stuff. I think that might be a nice way to highlight like which ones are yours particularly.
And I think I'm maybe in somewhat of a minority in the fact that I think the visual effects only need a little bit of toning down.
Yeah.
I don't think they necessarily, personally, I don't feel that they need a lot of toning down, just a little bit.
I'm kind of looking at this in the perspective of you and I have the funny habit of, accidentally staying up all night, and
I would never. I would never. No.
But like, even when I'm working and I get really focused at work, especially here during the winter seasons, right? That the sun sets earlier in the day compared to the summer. And so when that nighttime kind of creeps up on you and you go from the daytime with the brightness around you and these flashiness not being a problem, to suddenly you're in a darker environment and these flashes are happening and they're the main source of light that are constantly happening, that could be a kind of a big problem in that case. Because then they're accentuated by the fact that you are now in a darker room without realizing that, the room got darker until suddenly you're like, it's so bright, my eyes hurt. Oh, hey, it's dark. Because I've done that with coding, where I'm like working on my website that I'm working on that day, and then I go to render it and it refreshes, and there's like this bright patch as it's refreshing, and I'm like, oh hey, it's dark in here, you know. But Narc just brought this up. Yeah, actually, we actually are pulling our stuff from the community, and the person that posted that specifically was pulling up Narc's Narc's video. So yeah, welcome in, by the way. But yeah, I think it's important that we address these things, because I mean, this is how the community is feeling, and I also like knowing how you guys feel, because sure, like during the daytime when it's bright out, I'm not super affected by it, but with having X amount of people, like sure, there's only what 3-4 of them here, double that for a normal party size. And to me, with the 4 of them here, the visualizations with how bright everything is already a little too hectic. Doubling that would just be, I think, in my mind, just oof.
I agree.
And yeah,
also,
sorry,
add on top of that the boss's spell effects. The mob spell effects.
Honestly, it's hard to tell what the mob spell effects are in this, because I just see flashing constantly, and it's like a little hard to follow, which I think a lot of the community is like, yeah, spell readability is important. This kind of brings me to our final like random topic, which is from the forums by Dark Tides, and their issue is people saying the go-to phrase is "it's still in alpha." And this one I'm primarily bringing up because, you know, it's one of those things where the comments are more so what I'm focused on. Although I found it amusing that the first comment was like, "Glad you're here, sends intrepid careers." Like, if you're so like particular about how it should look, maybe you should go apply and try to change, you know, how things are or whatever. Kind of insinuation there. But they were talking about like people saying polish comes later is trickery, and I don't think so. As one of the people, who was it? I think it was Davey, maybe? No. One of them, I'm gonna scroll until I find it exactly. Oh, there we go. Atama said that not really, in response to like anyone able to tell me what combat style ASC will have, because he said not really. I mean, I played Alpha 1, but when I watch Alpha 2 gameplay, it looks like so different from what I played in Alpha 1 that it may as well be a different game. And so the idea that the Alpha 2 will never add polish to the gameplay just is, and respectfully, ridiculous, because the point of Alpha 2 is adding that polish, is getting to that phase. I can understand, you know, a lot of these rebrand quote unquote alpha games that are just, you know, being put out there until they're like pretend alpha, pretend betas, but in a real alpha, yeah, that's where a lot of the core systems are still being built. The core systems are still being polished. I expect by the end of Alpha 2, before we move into Beta 1, these will be ready.
I agree. I believe, I've said this for a long time, the essence of the terms alpha and beta have been lost because of things like Steam Early Access.
Yeah.
One of the MMOs that I play, one of the small MMOs that I play, was in alpha when I started playing it, but it was fully playable. Like that's not what an alpha should be. And I had this MMO is so small. I know the creators. I talked to them.
Yeah.
And I was like, you should not be calling this an alpha, because you've basically released a half-finished free-to-play game that you're calling alpha. And then they went and they finally got approved to put it on Steam, and now it's in early access.
Right.
And it's been like 2 years and it's still in early access. It's like, I know what this game is supposed to be, and it's nowhere near finished.
Right.
So why are you doing it like this? What Ashes is doing is actual phases of development. They had a legitimate Alpha 1 where they tested the game for a month with a small group of players and got feedback and got data from it, and now they're in the iteration phase of taking that data, improving what we played, and figuring out what to do next, iterating all their systems, finishing getting classes sorted and skills sorted and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, this stuff takes a long time. Like all in all, I think it was Jalan who said, all in all, Final Fantasy 14 was in development for 9 years.
Right.
Before it was like done. So we're coming up on year 6, and this game is ambitious. We all know how ambitious this game is. It's going to have one of the largest maps in an MMO to ever release at launch.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to have systems and background stuff that we've never even seen before. We've never even thought that would work.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
No matter which way you slice it, they're working.
Yeah.
This is a huge endeavor, and it's something that I'm happy that they don't have to answer to a bigger corporate for dates and stuff. They won't be rushed to finish this. They will take as long as it needs to take to get it done.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, people who come and ask me, when's the Alpha 2? When's Alpha 2? I always say, I'm not going to give a date until they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it'll be ready when it's ready.
Yeah.
And we've got, and like we were talking about with the animations, they've still got so much to do and so many different little things to take care of and figure out. That we're still waiting on Nodes 3.
Vertec, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that people are silly. I don't usually like to call people's posts silly, but I think this is one that just wasn't needed. Because the phrase "it's still an alpha" it's a go-to for a reason, because it's still an alpha.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's different teams working on different things means that even though one system looks like it's completely all done, doesn't mean that another system is, because the people responsible for one aren't necessarily having any input on the other outside of opinions. They're not contributing any workload to it. So they're getting one system done. Or even for the biggest example is, they keep putting out all this artwork and they keep doing this artwork, but yet they don't have the combat system ready. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, because artists aren't doing the coding. So
exactly.
And
do you want them to stop what they're doing to learn?
Yeah.
Do you want them to stop doing art and learn how to code to go code the system also? Because then the art's going to fall behind. And you're going to be wondering why the combat system's ready, but they're using stick figures to show you how the combat works.
And Atomic kind of plays devil's advocate on this topic as well. They said I should follow up with my opinion on where, quote unquote, it's still an alpha is helpful and where it is harmful. If a person gripes about missing a feature, it's helpful. If they declare the game will suck at launch, it's helpful. If a person is comparing footage to other games and saying that other games are better, it's helpful. However, if a person is giving their opinion about what they see and what they'd like to change, it's kind of harmful. The developers want feedback. Why would someone try to squelch that feedback in some misguided attempt to defend the game? If someone says that they wish the developers had made a different choice, it's harmful. There are times when it's a useful reminder, but there are other times when it's a bludgeon to stifle discussion or an excuse to cover up a problem. And I mean, I could see it from that perspective. Their combat is crap. Okay, well, it's still an alpha. It's still being iterated upon. It's helpful in that case. However, if somebody were like, well, why don't they do it like this? I think this way would be a better way of handling the threat mitigation. Well, it's still an alpha. Like, I could see how that ends up kind of being like, well, you gotta wait for them to like finish the game first before you can have that kind of like, no. They want our feedback now, so they can do it as best as they can. They can take that into consideration and do it right the first time. And yeah, I mean, absolutely, it should come out whenever it comes out. And there was somebody else on Reddit, and this is just a side conversation piece at this point, because Wicca, you kind of mentioned that Final Fantasy XIV took 9 years to, actually launch from beginning to finish. And somebody on Reddit was saying, it's been 5 years. When is it officially going too slow for development? And I think something like that, if you take Ashes of Creation and the team size behind Ashes of Creation, compare it to Final Fantasy XIV, the team size behind Final Fantasy XIV, I think that gives you a wonderful comparison and a wonderful roadmap to understand better. It's taken us 5 years to get to this point. And yeah, some of that had to be redone because of servers. And some of that had to be redone because they migrated. And that set them back a little bit, but at the same time, it gave them leaps and bounds to go forward.
Exactly.
Yeah, you legitimately can't compare it to Final Fantasy in almost any way because of stuff like that. Because you have Square Enix, which, I mean, hello, Square Enix. You have Final
Right.
Fantasy. I mean, hello, how long has that been a successful IP that people are happy to pour money into with every single game and relaunch and remake that's ever tossed out?
You guys want to guess how many people roughly work on 14?
Oh, I'm terrified.
Right now, probably 1,000 people.
It's right around 600.
Yeah, I was gonna say easily multiple hundreds of people.
Yeah, it's right around 600 people.
Yeah.
That get named in the credits for helping for developing Final Fantasy.
As soon as the idea seriously got put forward, like the showrunners, the people who run the big decisions at Square Enix probably said, is like $2 billion going to be enough to get this off the ground? Because let's go.
Yeah.
You need new headquarters? Do we need to buy all new staff, or what are we doing here?
Yeah. And I mean,
Whatever it is, yes.
Penumbral says Unreal Engine 5 is going to make the process a lot easier than other MMOs had to go through, though, which is true. However, there's also specific situations like Intrepid having to build their own tool sets for what they're trying to accomplish. That's unclear if that was made available within Unreal Engine 5 or not, specifically the tool that the engineers came up with so that the artists could retexture stuff really quickly. And then I think there was another tool that would help with kind of automizing what gets placed while also making it random within different
they did a lot
buildings.
of stuff like that.
There's lots of stuff that they have to do, but I mean, I think that is the amazing part of making an MMO in today's day and age. We have these unique capabilities due to software engineering, due to these softwares that are being presented like Unreal Engine 5 that just revolutionize how games are being created. And I mean, at the same time, if you put the company Square Enix against Ashes of Creation, I guarantee you Ashes will still be slower to release than Square Enix with the same tools because of the manpower.
Exactly.
But
100%.
That being said, I mean, case in point, looking at what Penumbral said, this is the best looking alpha I've ever seen. A lot of the stuff that I test, there's like green screens happening. There's like Siri reading out quest things to you.
100%. 100%.
So.
Another thing I can also reference back. Do either of you know what EverQuest Next is?
I've heard of it, but I've not looked into it.
I know what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, I know. I remember what it was supposed to be. That game was in development for 7 years.
Oh my gosh!
And then all of a sudden, rug pull. Whole game was gone because they couldn't achieve what they wanted to achieve with the current technology at the time. They wanted a completely voxel-based world that was destructible. Cool in theory, horrible in practice.
Yeah. And a lot of those things, like, you don't know until you absolutely get in there and get your hands on stuff what the reality is.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the time, as a web developer, my job is to sit there and think through the logic of how something should be handled and then go in and make that logic happen. So, for example, I have to work on a website where we're updating like a blog for it, and I have to think of how would clicking on a filter affect everything else, including like the way that filter that you clicked looks and how the page loads, and whether or not there's a show more button at the bottom. Like, there's a lot of logic that goes behind that, and you have to sit there and think of how these are going to be solved, and then go in and try to solve those problems.
Yeah.
And I mean, what I do, I think is complicated, but I'm also like technically a junior web developer that was given the role of a normal web developer, not junior, which I was really grateful for. But to me, it's difficult. Now imagine applying that to to video games and all the systems that are encapsulated within a video game, which, by the way, for those of you that don't know, I wanted to go into video game design initially. I started off in video game design art, and then I realized that coding was the thing that was behind making your character do that little dance thing. And that's initially what sparked my interest in software. And I was like, oh, that sounds so cool. I can do that. Like, I hook up this piece of code that when you do /dance, it calls this particular animation to happen. I like that. That's really cool. But, I don't know if I could handle as big of a complex game situation. Penumbra says, great stream, guys. WiccaSloth was a great choice for a guest. Thank you. We've been wanting to get Wicca on for a while. I'm out. Have a great night. Sleep well. And welcome in to the tavern. I'm not sure how to say your name.
Mionikoi? That's what I'm guessing.
Maybe? I don't know if that's an L or an I. It's hard to tell with the font. But yeah, no, we also wanted to share art by Supreme Phoenix as the fan focus. And for those of you that don't know, Supreme Phoenix has done our background art that we have here. From the stone wall to the nameplates that we have, and Myonikoi. Or just Mayo? Okay, I'll take Mayo. I'm one of those people that I'm gonna give you like a fancy name on accident because I missay it. But yeah, this is his most recent fan art for Ashes, and he's done other ones like a 3D looking effect for a sandal on the back of a caravan wagon thing, and some other cool stuff. There's some other things that he created for us that you guys will see soon, but if you've been tuning in for our weekend and or tavern talks, you may have seen it already. But I plan to just get our new overlay here on this part of the stream soon. So
yes, very soon.
Yeah.
Awesome. I can't wait to see it.
Well, I think that kind of hits everything that I planned to chat about today. Was there anything else you guys wanted to talk about?
I had so much fun.
Right?
I think that might be about it for me.
Okay. Here, I wanted to share out that Twitter post, which has this art by Supreme Phoenix. I do believe our friendo is over at Tangents of Creation just wanted to tacos. Just went live. Who else is currently live? Let's see. We have Tech Deck with Lost Ark as well.
It might be me in a few minutes.
Ooh, we could totally raid over to a Wicca, you guys. You guys wanna help us raid Wicca?
We've got an Ender Dragon to kill.
Watch Wicca do was it a Minecraft raid?
Yeah, we're currently playing a mod pack called All the Mod 6. It's really technical, super advanced Minecraft, and we're getting ready to finally go over to the end and progress a little bit.
Ooh.
Sounds fun. Well, if you want to get that started up, we can do a countdown over to raid you guys. I too raid for money, Merc Raider. I don't have bits to give you guys. I'm sorry. We're running off of our own fumes over here.
But before you run away to get your stream all started up there, did you have any closing things you wanted to let people know about? Anything you wanted to share out to people? Any plugs you wanted to do?
I am so thankful to finally be able to sit and have a chat with you guys. I'd be more than willing to come back anytime in the future if you guys need a guest or something falls through and you need somebody or anything like that. I had so much fun. I can always talk about Ashes. It's a blast for me. For as far as like, if you guys want to come and find me at some point, I'm actually in the middle of doing the 365 challenge. I'm streaming every single day this year.
Nice.
Day 41 this year. So far, I stream for like 10 hours a day every single day. We do everything from Minecraft to Raid Shadow Legends to all sorts of stuff. We hang out, we vibe, we have a good time. You can check out my Instagram. I always post when I'm going live on Instagram.
Nice.
Yeah, 365 challenge. It's pretty hefty endeavor right there.
Yeah.
Like day 40 or 41 was it?
Yeah, day 41, and I did 4 months of practice before I actually started the challenge, so it's actually been a lot longer.
Yeah, because I mean, I can't really say that I would be too enthused to stream every single day, but I also don't do it, so it's like getting out of the habit or getting into the habit takes a little bit of time.
I love just sitting in front of a camera and just talking to whoever shows up in chat. And for anyone here who does end up wandering over into my chat, I actually have a channel point redeem where you can force me to stop playing the game I'm playing, change everything, and we just talk about Ashes.
Nice. I like it.
Might
have to do that at some point.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. It's super great. I love it. But no, yeah, I had so much fun. I was so happy when Vertec messaged me on Discord this morning, like, "Hey, do you wanna hop over on the podcast?" And I went, "Yes, sir."
Alrighty, well, hey, are you all set to jump over, or you still need a little bit of time to get set up there?
I am all good to go.
All right.
Right. Just didn't want to try and jump over too soon if you weren't quite ready there. Take your time. But I suppose as we're getting geared up here, I want to take this time to thank everybody again for spending your time with us. Thanks for joining us and hanging out with us, giving us your feedback and chit-chatting. We always appreciate it. That is, after all, why we're here. And if you didn't have fun, I'm sorry. We'll do better next time. There are no refunds for this time, though. You spent your time here, and though we appreciate it, we cannot refund you your time.
Yeah, we are not Time Lords yet.
Yeah, not yet. We're working on that.
You both did fantastic, and you're wonderful hosts.
Aw, thank you.
Oh, why thank you.
Should I go ahead and get the raid started for WiccaSloth?
Yeah.
Let's get it.
All right.
We can get started up there.
Feel free to join us in raiding over to WiccaSloth, and I hope you guys have a cozy, slothy rest of your evening. Although I'm sure Wicca will be having a very opposite slothful night of fighting things. So, I hope you guys have a wonderful evening, and if we see you over the weekend, I'll see you next time. If not, see you next Friday for our next podcast.
Take care, everybody.